What's up, Leer here with another Monday meta report. Over the last 7 days I look at the most popular and most promising decks and how they performed. With me winning Fight Night, my words speak double the truth now. How can words be 200% the truth? Well, I don't know, but that's how it works, right? Let's dive into the data and see what archetypes you should play and those you should prepare to face. Sorting Belco's meta tier list by playrate, we get this graph that you can see on your screen. Viego and Girls is found at the top now, combining both Elise Viego and Elise Viego Katarina, sporting an 8.5% win rate. This archetype is in a fierce popularity battle with Lissandra Talia, also known as Rolls, achieving a comparable 8.4% play rate. After a steep journey, Jin Annie or Ginny is still in the top 3 with a 5.7% play rate. That's quite a steep drop by 3% compared to the second and first most played deck. Talking about steep changes, Bart Galio, or also known as Demacia Fried Chicken, made it from 0 to 100 in a single week, reaching a 4% play rate. Serving a bit further, we find 3 decks at a 3% play rate, Annie Ezreal having its play rate from last week, Ilaoi J4 combining all Ilaoi J4 versions now with or without TF or Garen, and Pike Rek'Sai, also known as Urk. At a high 2% play rate, we also find 3 decks, Fizz Riven, which still lacks a nickname, so if you know a good one, please write them in the comments, Nautilus Maokai, also known as Deep, and Zbart. Now, turning to win rate, we get this result. It's quite a drastically different scenario that unfolds. Heimerdinger Jace, also known as Shadowtech, thanks to all the submissions for the nickname last week, doesn't bear a banner, but they are the only 54% win rate bearer this week. That being said, Fizz Riven makes a good effort and only barely falls short with a 53.8% win rate. Zoe Felios, on the other hand, has powered up with the Winding Light and now sports a 53.3% win rate, with one of the most unique playstyles in the game currently. Despite the overwhelming play rate putting a target on their back, Viego and Girls still delivers in the win rate department with the same 53.5% win rate as Aphelios Zoe. While Demacia Fried Chicken makes a good effort at being a good deck with a 52% win rate, Poppy one-ups the Birdie Fellow, rocking a 53% win rate as Poppy Bart. Similar to Viego and Girls, Rolls also maintains a reasonable win rate despite its high play rate, maintaining now a 52% or 52.7% win rate, as you can see. Pantheon Yumi Demacio, or PhD, appeared utterly broken at the start of the patch, but turned out to be a fleeting success. The deck is on a consistent downward trend, but still holds a 52.3% win rate for now. Lastly, Viego Shurima, or San Viego, and Ilaoi J4 are the last decks with a close to 52% win rate. Talking about the reasons, despite Shadowtech rising to the number 1 win rate deck, its win rate actually stayed the same as last week. So last week it was also 54.1% win rate. It's rather that Viego and Girls has lost some power due to the rise of 2 novel archetypes, Riven Fizz and Aphelios Zoe. As we can see in this matchup graph. With the trend of those 2 decks, Fizz Riven and Aphelios Zoe, the stocks of Viego and Girls, or here in this picture, also named Camavaran Deserter, this matchup table is from Legna's website, by the way, is likely to go down in the not too distant future. If you want to play the deck while it's still at a high point, now's the perfect time. With the help of the Termon's brand new guide on Viego Noxus over at masteringruneterra.com, you will become a master of the deck in no time. That being said, let's actually look at Shadow Tech now. Hopefully Shirtless Kings stealing other people's show doesn't become a regular thing here. So, as we can see, Shadow Tech is not an overpowered deck at all. There's a fairly polarized matchup table with an equal amount of good and bad matchups. While Shadow Tech gets bullied by thralls, it destroys Viego Noxus in return, as we can see with a 34% win rate and against Viego Noxus with a 60% win rate. It has a phenomenal win rate against Ginny, but struggles tremendously against Fizz Riven, as we can see with a 69% win rate versus a 37.6% win rate. Evidently, Heimerdinger Jace is a heavily meta-dependent deck that benefits from Ginny and Viego Noxus being in the trend. Looking in the future though, the rise of Fizz Riven might mean the end of Shadow Tech, especially if the downward trend of Anijin and the maybe upcoming downward trend of Viego Noxus continues, or might actually happen. Yep, that's it. The list I linked for Shadow Tech, oh, I didn't link a list here. Never mind, you can also read this as a written guide actually, and I'm kind of reading my script from the article, so sometimes when I say I linked something, it's not 100% accurate. But there's actually two different lists for Shadow Tech out there, and one is running Aloof Traveler and one isn't. And I think that, well, the data shows that the list with Aloof Traveler as a 3-off has a 5% higher win rate than usual. So instead of a 54% win rate, it has actually a 59% win rate. But it's a fairly low played deck list, and that's why yeah, the overall win rate of the deck isn't 59%. And I think that Aloof Traveler is kind of a really good addition to the deck currently, because, for example, against Fizz Riven, it can discard Papercraft Dragon, so the attached unit that gives the unit double attack. And that's really good because it denies the win condition of Riven Fizz. Or it can also discard the Winding Light against Aphelios Zoe, or Invasive Hydrovine against Viego decks. So it is able to discard, yeah, opponents' win conditions, and thus increase the win rate of the deck quite a mile. Now, I said that, or we saw in the stats that Pantheon Yuumi was on a consistent downwards trend since 2 weeks now. But why has PhD been losing so much win rate in recent times? Isn't the deck absolutely blasted and should get nerfed into oblivion like most people say? Pantheon Yuumi's biggest adversary is Noxus. Be it aggressive Ginny, removal focused Tribeam, or control oriented Viego Noxus. All of these decks are horrendous matchups for PhD. On the other hand, Pantheon Yuumi does pretty well against thralls with a 55% win rate, Demacia Fried Chicken, which has been rising now, with a 62% win rate, and even Fizz Riven with a 55% win rate. So, similar to Shadow Tech, the success of PhD relies on the popularity of the above mentioned decks. Well, again, not above mentioned, but previously mentioned, right? Since it's impossible to tell what archetypes will become or stay popular, since this trend in who stays popular isn't really correlating to win rate. For example, because Ginny gets played a lot, even though it doesn't have a great because it doesn't have a great win rate, we can't really predict if these Noxus decks will be still staying popular in the future. So we will just have to wait and see how the meta develops, and if Pantheon Yuumi can find its grounding with good matchups again. But what might be the final nail in the coffin for PhD is the upcoming balance patch. Rybin Rubinzu actually kind of confirmed with a tweet that the deck will be nerfed and needs adjustments, so my hopes for one of my favorite decks in Pantheon Yumi aren't exactly high. With that being said, let's now look at the two most promising decks this week, Failure Zoe and Riven Fizz. Here we can see a matchup table of both of those decks. These two decks have one thing in common, and it's easy to mistake their playstyle. The untrained eye could look at Zoe Failures and think, hey, it's Invoke Control. Or you could look at Fizz Riven and see, oh, it's another aggro deck. But counterintuitively, it's quite the opposite. Zoe Failures is a discard aggro deck that has similarities to Fizz Lulu. While Fizz Lulu Yordle in Arms relied on Lulu buffing a Flame Trompas in the early game and closing the game with Yordle in Arms on a white board, Failure Zoe has more win conditions which you could call orthogonal because they are quite independent of each other. And these win conditions are Failures outvaluing the foe with removal and his moon weapons, or Zoe can level up and grant the entire board elusive and avoid jump blockers, or the Winding Light can buff a 5 unit white board, similar to Yordles in Arms in Fizz Lulu. On the other hand, Fizz Riven isn't a classic run-of-the-mill aggro deck either. It's rather a combo one-turn kill deck similar to Akshan Sivir, for example. With Fizz and Papercraft Dragon, the archetype can create an uncountable attack or quickly crank up a leveled Riven for an easier to set up but more prone to removal attack. While Failure Zoe is great against Ginny thanks to their ease of flooding the board, they struggle against the AoE removal of Thralls and high health Demacia units of Demacia Fried Chicken, as you can see in this matchup table here. Contrary to that, this Riven is efficient at outpacing Thralls and doesn't rely on a white board, so it's not prone to AoE removals. It can also avoid Shadow Tag's removal like Vengeance, for example, with a Stealth tagged Fizz. For that, Fizz Riven is prone to decks with a white board like Ginny or Failure Zoe. What both decks also have in common though is their slightly favorable matchup against Vegan Girls, where slightly favorable for Failure Zoe and actually pretty favorable for Fizz Riven. If you want, you can also check out Jay's Sensational's premium guide, deck guide on Fizz Riven over at Mastering Runeterra. And in the coming days there will also be a Failure Zoe Y deck guide by Card Gamer. So keep your eyes peeled for that. So moving on, I have this honorable mention section where I just go over a couple of high-performing decks that don't really show up in the data because they don't get played enough. And this week I want to start with Jay's Lux. It's actually a creation by a player called Devibo, and it has been putting up numbers lately. To be exact, it has a 56% win rate in the past 2 days, over 400 games. And yeah, these 400 games are less than a 1% play rate, and that's why they don't show up in the meta tier list of Balco where I take my data from. The deck appears to beat pretty much everything that isn't Thralls or Fizz Riven, which are two decks that are getting pretty popular, are exactly popular, but still. Especially Viego Noxus and Ginny are important favored matchups for the deck. As it happens to be, if you want to read an in-depth guide by the original creator of the archetype, you don't have to look further, because you can check out the deck guide over on Mastering Runeterra for free. The second honorable mention is Graven Cyan Vi, and Graven Cyan Vi has pretty much always been there in the meta. As a matter of fact, it has been there for several seasons now. With the recent Cyan buff, numbers seem to favor the Raging Monstrosity over Rumble. So there previously was a pretty popular deck, and that was Graven Rumble. And now it seems that Graven Vi Cyan has to be taking its place. Graven Cyan Vi has a 55% win rate in the past 2 days over 400 games, so again less than a 1% play rate, and that's why it didn't show up in the meta tier list. And we also happen to have a guide on this deck by Card Gamer over at masteringruneterra.com, so you can check it out. The last honorable mention I want to talk about is Leer 6. Leer 6 is returning to last season's performance, where it was at the end of the season putting up pretty high numbers. In this week it sports a 53% win rate in the past 2 days over 500 games, most prominently piloted by the Mastering Runeterra GG Tour winner Sorry or Trickster Sorry, who brought the deck to said tournament. There's an in-depth guide actually by yours truly, over at Mastering Runeterra, but there was also an older deck guide by Sorry. But yeah, unfortunately, it got deleted by the site where Sorry wrote it for, so maybe you can find it somewhere in the internet, but I didn't. Anyways, with the developments this week, there's only a single deck with a 54% win rate. So if we go back, we can see that on the win rate graph, there's only Shadow Tech with a low 54% win rate, and otherwise there are only decks with a below win rate. And if we compare that to other weeks or previous seasons, there were pretty much always decks that put up a 55% and above win rate. So this speaks for an extremely well-balanced meta where no deck sticks out to be massively overpowered. That being said though, it's still unclear if this trend will continue in the coming weeks, or if Fizz Riven or Failure Zoe or another unknown contender might ascend to unholy numbers. So let's come back next week to find out together. I hope you learned something today to improve your game. You might even feel a little courageous and try out an honorable mention. Anyways, have fun on the ladder and see you next week.